Colin Cadet here for Woodworkweb. Today we've got something completely different to do. Today we're going to be restoring an old antique chair. Now if you've never done a project like this, it's pretty interesting. There's a lot of things that you'll need to take into account, the way it's constructed, how to deconstruct it, but most of all, you want to preserve the patina, the feel, the look and feel of the original piece. And let's bring the chair up and we'll let you have a look at it and see what we're talking about. Here's the chair that we've been asked to restore. Now the reason that it needs some restoration is because you may not be able to see it on the video, but it's all the joints are loose. These things have the arms have all come off, so it really needs some work to disassemble the entire chair and put it back together again. But in so doing, we don't want to affect the actual patina of the chair. And I'm going to give you some close-ups so that you can actually see. This chair is about 100 years old. It was apparently manufactured by somebody, a family member, back in the early 1910, something around that age. It's not a particularly valuable chair, but it's valuable in that it's an heirloom for a family. And I'm going to show you some close-ups where you can actually see the machine marks on the chair, and those are the things that we don't want to remove because that's part of the original manufacturing process. So let's have a look at some close-ups of those. We need to remember that this chair was manufactured over 100 years ago, or around 100 years ago, and that they didn't necessarily have the tools and the techniques that we have today. At least they weren't available to everybody who wanted to do woodworking. So this chair, we've discovered, has been put together using dowels. And what I'm going to do, and I'm not going to show you the entire process because we just don't have time, but I'm going to be using a soft rubber mallet with some of these connections, some of these joints here that are not as loose as they need to be to pull apart easily. I'll be using the soft side of a rubber mallet to take these apart. So once the chair is fully apart, we'll start looking at what we're going to do to restore that. The only thing left to disassemble is the back. Okay, there's all the pieces of our chair. Now we need to figure out what we're going to do to put this back together. Well, a few days have gone by and the chair is finally starting to come together. You can see that I didn't videotape every part of it because it was too long and boring. But a number of problems cropped up along the way. First of all, at one point I believed that I could drill holes to make the dowels bigger, but because of the size of some of the wood, that wasn't actually possible. So I ended up that I had to use a couple of different sizes of dowling, and I had to go back to the original dowel and just clean out the holes and try and use that. I'm nearing more completion now, and there was lots of problems. This was a very difficult project, taking out the dowels and realigning, drilling out some of them, and making them tighter. So I'll try and do a little bit more videotaping as I go along so that you can see what's going to happen. Next, I'm actually going to be putting the arms in, and this is where I'm actually going to be putting some extra wood in here to make this a little bit stronger. I've talked to the owners, and this was not a well-made chair to begin with, and there were a few areas where it needed to be beefed up a bit. And so, with their permission, I'm going to do that. This chair is never going to appear on the Antiques Roadshow, so it's more important to the owners that it be a good working chair and an antique and a family heirloom than it is to be structurally perfect. So they want it to last more than to just simply look good and be an ornament in their living room. So from here on, I'm going to be putting the arms across and putting some very small wood in there, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that. I'm back with the chair rebuild marathon. This has been going on for days and days, although I've kept a lot of this from view because a lot of it is boring and tedious work. I'm just about to put the arms on now, and as I said before, this chair was not really well built, and there's only dowels that hold this on. There's a lot of pressure at the back of these legs, and there's only a small dowel because it's only 3/4 inch wood here, so you can't put a large dowel in there. So what I've done, and what I've agreed with the owners of the chair, is to, in this case, custom make some little pieces, reinforcing pieces underneath this side and the back of the chair. And so that's what I'm going to do now, but I want to show you how I made these. It's very important because if you do this wrong, you're going to be using end grain. And I want to show you on the blackboard how I cut the wood for this. Now, when you're making glue-ups, and it doesn't matter what kind of glue you're using, I'm just using, in most of this chair, I'm using just the ordinary yellow carpenter's glue. But when you're gluing wood together, there's two kinds of grain, we'll assume, in wood. There's long grain, we know about long grain, and there's end grain, which is the end of a board. Now, long grain, if you're gluing long grain to long grain, like when you're gluing boards together, this glues together very well. It's very strong. In many woods, the wood will actually break before the glue will let go. But when you're gluing end grains together, it's very different. Gluing end grain to end grain is a very poor joint. The glue does not hold well, and that's because a lot of the glue gets sucked up into the fibers of the wood, so there isn't the strength in there, and even end grain to long grain is not an ideal gluing surface. So what I've done with mine is, instead of cutting the long grain, normally you would cut a board, to do a 45-degree angle, you would cut a board like this. There's the board, you would cut an angle like this, and maybe make a bit of a design in here. Here you've got end grain, and here you have long grain. Now, because end grain on the chair, it's going to need more than end grain on one side, I actually did a compromise. And on my boards, I cut them like this. Now, it's not a true end grain and it's not a true long grain, but it gives a much better gluing surface, and the glue will stick much better with that kind of a grain than just an end grain. So in this one, the long grain would have stuck very well, the end grain not well at all. So in this compromise, I now have two pretty good surfaces for the glue to stick to. And that's what I'm going to be gluing on next. This is my corner pieces, and I've outlined in rough black felt pen so you can actually see. I'm going to put a little bit of a design on this so it's going to blend a little bit more with the chair. So I'm just going to cut that out now on the bandsaw. I've cut all the reinforcing blocks now, and they're a little bit on the rough side, but I did that on purpose because I wanted to clean them up by hand, and I'm going to do that on the belt sander. So in just a couple of minutes on the belt sander, I've cleaned up that little reinforcing block very, very nicely. So it's got semi-long grain on each side. So that's the next step, is actually gluing the arms on. The chair restore is almost done. The final thing will be to glue on the bottom rails. Okay, this is the completion of the restoration or rebuilding of this 100-year-old rocking chair. It was quite the job. The chair was upgraded. You can see that these are the pieces that I added here to add some stability, and they actually add to the chair rather than take away from it. So not only are they making this chair a lot stronger, they're actually going to add a lot more life to what is right now a very usable chair for the owners. So that's it for this project. Be sure to check out our website for more information, woodworkweb.com. I'm Colin Canet. Thanks for watching.